Today's story is about some feuding brothers, Jacob and Esau. There is a high probability that many of you in here have heard this story before. There's also a chance that you might be a little tired of it. But we have never fully mined any tale in the Bible, and so we turn to it again today to see what this story of Jacob and Esau and their parents, Rebekah and Isaac, might have to say to us this morning here in this place. I did, though, need a little fresh look at the story as I was preparing. So I turned to a podcast called The Bible for Normal People. It's run by Pete Enns. In episode 196, Chris Huckletubby is interviewed. Now, Huckletubby is a member of the Chickasaw Nation, but he did not grow up in indigenous culture. He grew up in California and was raised an evangelical. Then he went to seminary, and while in seminary, his worldview exploded, as tends to happen. So as that happened, he sought his roots in his indigenous community. Now, Huckletubby is deeply rooted in his indigenous community and has discovered his identity as a theologian. So he brings those identities to his reading of Scripture. And that is what he was talking about in this podcast. He took a look at today's Scripture passage, at the story of Jacob and Esau, and he said that for many non-U.S. cultures, including many indigenous cultures, the story of Jacob and Esau is obviously a trickster tale. Now, the interviewer did ask him why many European and North American readers don't see the trickster tale in this story. Why isn't it obvious to them what's obvious to all of these other cultures? And Huckletubby responded, because we're in power, right? And the tricksters are for people who don't have the power and they're trying to get some. What's a trickster tale? It's a folk tale with the central character or characters that are tricksters. And a trickster is exactly what it sounds like. The trickster is never the character who is already on top or already in a position of power and privilege. The trickster is always a few rungs down on that ladder. And when they want or need something, when they have a need or a desire, they cannot rely on their entitlement or their power or their privilege to get what they want or need. Instead, they have to rely on their wits. Tricksters are, in Huckletubby's words, boundary crossers. They destabilize what we expect, what is habitual. They make fun of our lives. They oftentimes get themselves into trouble. He goes on to talk about the trickster not as good or bad. The trickster in the story doesn't have a moral value of being bad or good. They're just a creator of mischief who challenges the status quo. And then Huckletubby goes on to say, as a result of the mischief and the chaos that they are creating, we may learn something about why the world is ordered the way that it is, or we may learn to question the status quo. And these are not moral tales. There's not a moral to the story, although some modern readers of trickster tales have tried to give them a moral to the story. Instead, the trickster tale is of value for its ambiguity, for its open-endedness, and for the way that the reader can enter the tale from their context. We are to sit with it and wrestle with it, and here's another quote from Huckletubby that I love, co-create meaning with the Spirit. So with all of that in mind, we're going to hear this story as a trickster tale now. Children, we did not forget about you. Come on up to the circle. So come now, please. All right. When Zeph was in second grade, he did a deep dive into trickster tales. And so I asked him, hey, do you see Jacob and Esau as a trickster tale? And he said, yeah. And there's a twist to it, and I know exactly how to tell the story. And I said, well, okay then, you get to tell it. And he said, I will, but I am most comfortable telling it if other kids are acting it out while I tell it. So we are going to have some children help us a little bit here. Let's see. Charlotte, would you be willing to be Rebecca? Okay. And James is coming in here. We already checked with him about being Isaac. We need some twins. Oh, they're holding hands. Okay, Eliana and Violet. You two can be the twins. All right. We're going to put Isaac in this chair. Isaac's a sit-arounder in this story. And we'll put Rebecca, you're going to start here, but you'll end up over closer to Isaac. And this is kind of the home area here on the steps. And then whenever someone is supposed to go out to the fields, we'll put that here, kind of in the aisle, okay? Don't go too far, just a little bit there. Okay, we've got some spaces. All right, Zeph, do you want to go behind the pulpit so we can be grounded here? All right, go for it.
You may have heard the story of Jacob and Esau, but have you considered who the tricksters in this tale really are? Don't be deceived. Things are often not the way they seem. Listen to the story of the trickster hidden in this tale. Rebekah was from the land of Haran. Her spouse, Isaac, took her from Haran to a place far from her homeland, where they gave birth to twin boys. They named the first Esau. He was so hairy when he was born, he looked like he was wearing a coat. They named the second Jacob, which means heel grabber, because when he was born, he was grasping his brother's heel and trying to surpass him. When they were born, Esau was promised the birthright, the bigger portion of his father's wealth, because he was born first. Esau loved to hunt, going into the fields and hunting wild game. Isaac favored Esau. Jacob liked to stay inside, preparing meals and spending time with his mother and father. Rebekah favored Jacob. Once Esau came from hunting famished. He went to Jacob and asked him for some lentil stew that Jacob was preparing. Jacob said, I will give you some lentil stew in return for your birthright. Esau said, what good is my birthright to me? I'm starving. So Esau gave Jacob his birthright, the larger portion of his father's property, and Jacob gave him some lentil stew. Jacob now had the whole of his father's inheritance. Dear listeners, I ask you, did Esau not respect his birthright, or was he tricked by Jacob? Who was the trickster in this tale? Now, Isaac was growing old and ready to die. Isaac was also blind in his old age, but he could still hear, smell, feel, and taste. He summoned his older son, his favorite son, and told him, go into the field, bring back some wild game, and prepare the dish that I love, and once I have eaten it, I will bless you before I die. So Rebekah was listening when Isaac said this. She went to Jacob, her favorite son, and said, go to your father's flock of goats, slaughter a young goat and bring it to me, and I will prepare the dish that your father loves. You will serve it to him, and he will taste it and bless you instead of Esau. Jacob did as he asked, but afterward asked his mother, Esau is hairy and my skin is smooth. If my father feels my arm, what will I do? Rebekah took the skins from the goat and wrapped them around Jacob's arms. She said, now you feel like your brother. Rebekah also took Esau's best clothes and said to Jacob, put these on, they will smell of your brother. Once Jacob was wearing his brother's clothes, Rebekah sent him to Isaac's tent. Jacob went to his father with a meal in his hands. Isaac asked, "Esau?" Jacob said, "I am here." Hearing his voice, Isaac asked, "Are you really my son Esau and not my son Jacob?" Jacob replied, "I am your son Esau." Isaac commanded, "Come to me so I may feel you and know if you are really my son Esau." Once Isaac had felt Jacob's arms and smelled his clothes, he believed him. So he ate the dish that Rebekah had prepared and blessed him. He said, "The smell of my son is like a blessing of the Lord. May the earth feed you and give you plenty. May the nations bow to you. May you lord over your mother's sons. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." And Jacob walked out of his father's presence with the blessing added to the total of the birthright. Dear listeners, I ask you, who was the real trickster in this tale? As soon as Jacob walked out of his father's tent, Esau came in from hunting. He said, "Father, I have made the meal you desire. Now eat it so you may bless me." Isaac looked dazed. He asked, "Who are you?" Jacob said, "I am your son Esau." Isaac began to tremble. "Then who just came to me with a dish I love? Who did I just bless?" Esau fell to his knees and said, "Haven't you saved a blessing for me?" Isaac said, "I have already given the blessing to your brother and made him lord over you." Esau said, "Have you only one blessing, father? Bless me also." Isaac said, "The earth will give you enough to live on, but you will live by your sword and serve your brother. When you rebel, you shall break his yoke from your neck." Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing and wished him harm. Rebekah heard his ill wishes and sent Jacob away to her family where he would be protected from his brother. The brothers lived apart in neighboring lands, reconciling only once but never living in the same land again. That is how the brother nations of Israel and Edom were born. Never dwelling in the same land, always wrestling, but always brothers.
Thank you, children. All of you, as you were listening to that story, what did you hear? Who was the real trickster of this tale? You think Jacob? Okay, Jacob was a trickster. Rebekah. Which one? Maybe they both were. Maybe there's a master trickster and a trickster's apprentice. This whole thing of tricking and being tricked, this is kind of part of the story that keeps popping up. All right. What else did you notice? Did you notice anything else in that story that you thought, that's interesting? Anything else pop up for you? Did you notice the senses? We think of 5 senses, right? Which one was Isaac missing? Yeah, his sight, okay? So he didn't have sight. And then the tricksters were able to do something about 3 other senses. Which ones were those? Yep, smell, taste, and touch. There was one left. What is it? Hearing. And Jacob didn't sound like Esau. But did Isaac rely on that and go, doesn't quite sound right, I should listen to that? No. He said, 3 out of 4 isn't bad. There's a lot of interesting stuff in here. You all can go back to seats, and we're going to talk about the story some more. What is the mischief of the tale, and what does it reveal? That's a big question when we look at these trickster tales. There's something that stood out to me in this one. I'm going to read just this part from Genesis 27. This would be 36b through 38. Esau says to Isaac, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Isaac answered Esau, "I have already made him your lord, and I have already given him all his brothers as servants, and with grain and wine I have sustained him. What then can I do for you, my son?" Esau said to his father, "Have you only one blessing, father? Bless me also, father." And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. The word of the Lord. Sometimes a really strange phrase to say after we read a tough scripture, isn't it? Esau begs for blessing. "Don't you have any left?" And Isaac says, "Sorry, fresh out of blessing." It's like Charlotte, if you came to your dad and said, "Can I have a hug?" and he said, "I'm sorry, I'm out of hugs." Would that ever happen? No. It's ridiculous. This blessing that Isaac is giving is the Abrahamic blessing. Go back to that from 2 weeks ago if you were here in that worship service. We talked about that Abrahamic blessing. "I will bless you and make your name great, and you will be a blessing to all the nations." It's that breathing in and breathing out of the blessing. What do you hear in the blessing that Isaac gives to his son that is not in the Abrahamic blessing? Not rhetorical. What do you hear in it? "I will make you lord over your brothers." Power. Power over others. When Isaac turns the blessing into lording it over other people, he distorts it. He makes it into something it's not. The blessing is not power over others. But power over others, being lord over your brothers, that is limited. That is something that you can be out of. And if that is how Isaac rolls, and Rebekah and Jacob know that that's how he is, and they're the ones who do not benefit by that blessing, who are not entitled to that blessing, then what choice do they have but to become tricksters? I mean, yes, they had a choice. We all have choices. But you see it? Do you see why they might have done this? They become tricksters, grasping at the blessing, wrestling for that blessing. In this story, these tricksters bring to light the way that blessing has been morphed and mutated so that it resembles the blessing, but it's not the blessing. It is wildly different from "I will bless you and make your name great, and you will be a blessing." A couple of years ago, we were singing this story, and in the micro song that Jonathan Ruel wrote for this part of the story, for this family saga, he wrote, "It's all about the blessing, to take it or to be it." To take it or to be it. When the family no longer sees the blessing as something to be, it becomes something to be grasped, something that's in limited supply, something that makes for haves and have-nots. And in this story, everyone wants to be the haves. So as we're thinking about this, as we're sitting with this trickster tale, I wonder, how is the Spirit co-creating meaning with us? What does this tale and our context, what's the conversation that these have with each other? How do you hear this calling of blessedness? Where are our temptations to commodify the blessing, to limit it, to turn it into something it's not in the world around us? I think an easy response is that it's been commodified in the fact that we buy and sell signs that say blessed on them. So there's that. But going a little bit farther, I see it in the general winner-loser mentality that we sometimes have in our culture. To win, someone else must lose. The idea that someone else having gifts somehow diminishes our own. I see this a little bit in the way that we are tempted to approach being part of the church as consumerism. That the language of coming to church to be blessed instead of coming to church to be part of the blessed community. Do you hear the difference? It's there. It might feel subtle, but it's there. And there are probably many mutations of this blessing that you can hear and see in your life, in the world around you. When we mutate the blessing, it becomes something that we fight over and grasp for. When Isaac the fool and Rebekah the trickster did what they did, what they failed to recognize is that the blessing is not a limited human construct. God is the source of all blessing, and God's supply of blessing is limitless. There's enough for everyone. There's enough for all creation. And we join with all of creation in being stewards of that which comes from God. Stewards of the blessing, breathing it in and breathing it out, not saying, oh, I don't need any, give it all to someone else. No, being part of that community of blessedness, breathing in, breathing out the blessing, and enough for all mentality. I wonder if today this trickster tale might be calling us to reclaim the notion of blessing. I know we've talked about that word so much in the last couple of weeks. It might continue for just a little bit. But I think we need to reclaim it, to dwell in it, not as something to be grasped and taken, but as a way of living and being, to take it or to be it. And of course, you know that I'm saying, hey, let's be it. An unlimited, walls off, extravagant blessedness.